This occurred in 2014 when I was 26 and my former fiancé was 25. For the sake of simplicity, we will refer to the latter as Bob. We met in college and dated for 3 years prior to our engagement, with a wedding date that had been booked by the 4th year. Neither of our parents are financially well off, and she was attending graduate school, so the financial responsibility fell on me. The total cost was $22. The remaining balance of $20,000 was paid in full 4 days prior to the wedding. In the days leading up to the wedding, we experienced a series of challenges typical of a mid-20s relationship. These included instances of poor communication, excessive drinking on weekends, and occasional disagreements over minor issues. However, despite these challenges, our relationship was generally positive, and we invested significant time together in planning for our future together and navigating the transition to post-cohabitation life. As previously mentioned, the wedding and reception venue cashed my check 4 days before the wedding, despite the contract stating that this was not permitted. The deposit was refundable, as over 120 guests had been confirmed. A couple of dozen tuxedos and bridesmaid dresses had been fitted and paid for, and everything was falling into place. However, an inevitable series of events soon unfolded. On the night in question, it was a Friday evening in their new apartment, which they had moved into a few weeks prior. They had invited about a dozen friends over to pregame and head out to the bars in town. Included in this group of friends was my acquaintance with whom I had been acquainted since kindergarten. For the purposes of this account, we will refer to him as Ricky. Barb and I had spent a considerable amount of time with Ricky over the previous 3 years. He was undoubtedly one of her most favored companions. It is generally considered advantageous when one's significant other is able to interact amicably with individuals within one's social circle. The evening commenced at a local gentleman's club, where attendees were permitted to bring their own beverages. By the time we departed, we had consumed a quantity of whiskey equivalent to 1/5 of a standard bottle and approximately 30 units of alcohol. Once the children were asleep, the adults proceeded to consume alcohol for the next 3 hours. They visited 2 or 3 bars, resulting in the entire group becoming inebriated and unruly. When the bars closed, most people returned home except for myself, Barb, Ricky, and another couple who came back to our apartment for a nightcap. Once back at our apartment, the couple only lasted another 20 minutes before calling it a night and heading home. I was left with Bob, the refrigerator, and earlier in the evening at the hookah bar, I observed Bob and Ricky engaging in unusual behavior. Bob was checking his phone frequently, while Ricky was doing the same with hers after she locked the screen. I considered the possibility that they were planning something illicit, but I was unconcerned. 2 days prior, I was sober and in my house when I noticed the alcohol had been consumed. I considered purchasing more alcohol from a local establishment that remained open until 3 a.m. The time is 12 a.m. Barb and Ricky were under the influence of alcohol and appeared to be inebriated. However, there was no apparent reason to suspect any untoward incident would occur if I left my apartment complex for a brief period to procure beer from a local establishment. Nevertheless, I had an uneasy feeling that something was amiss and it caused me considerable distress. Consequently, I contacted my closest friend and he agreed to join me on the excursion to purchase beer and to accompany me back to the apartment after doing so. We proceeded to the sliding glass door that led to the living room, which was furnished with a sectional sofa. Upon opening the door and entering the apartment, we observed my former fiancé in a state of undress, engaged in a sexual act with Mr. Ricky. It was evident that neither of them was aware of our presence, despite our proximity of approximately 10 feet. After a brief interval of approximately 7 to 10 seconds, during which we attempted to comprehend the situation, neither of them appeared to notice our presence. The situation rapidly deteriorated. I lost my composure, consumed the alcohol, and threw the beverage at Ricky, who was topless. He was on his back, and I struck him twice in the eye and cheek with a forceful right hook while he was still in that position. He appeared terrified. To contextualize, I am 6 feet 220 inches lb and have played hockey throughout my life. Ricky is 5 feet 6 inches and weighs 140 pounds and is a runner. Following the assault, he began snoring loudly and was asleep for at least 5 minutes. In a state of heightened distress, I contacted her parents approximately 10 times until they awoke. I demanded that they immediately retrieve their daughter, who had been unfaithful to them. Their residence was only 5 minutes away, and they arrived shortly thereafter. While I was reprimanding Barb for her reprehensible and detestable decision, her parents rushed into the room, screaming at Bob. Ricky asked to be taken to the couch, and my colleague attempted to mediate the situation. The first thing I told everyone was I inquired as to the status of the wedding, which I had previously deemed unacceptable. I demanded the return of the ring and stated that I would prefer to forfeit the $20 than to remain in a relationship with an individual who had engaged in infidelity. Her parents proceeded to engage in a 20-minute discourse, attempting to persuade me to reconsider my stance and intermittently defending the actions of their daughter. They offered statements such as, "Why can't you forgive her?" and "Is it too late to cancel the wedding?" Meanwhile, Ricky had regained consciousness, and the right side of his face had swollen to a size comparable to that of a grapefruit, while his left eye was completely. The decision to evict him from the apartment was difficult, given that he was inebriated to the extent that he was unable to operate a vehicle. I contacted his brother, who was situated approximately 20 minutes away, and requested his assistance. Ricky and her parents were somewhat surprisingly able to remain calm and collected, despite the circumstances. I was able to maintain a level of composure that I had not previously experienced in similar situations. In the past, when I have been similarly distressed, I have found it challenging to articulate my thoughts in a coherent manner. However, on this occasion, I was able to express myself effectively. Ricky's brother picked him up, and Bob's parents transported her home. I methodically dismantled any objection, opinion, or plea for reconsideration expressed by everyone in the room. Felt really __great. I am not going to pretend that the following months were easy and everything worked out in my favor. 2 months later, the farmer company I worked at decided to lay off my entire division. I had accumulated thousands in credit card debt to pay for the wedding and unemployment. The experience lingered in my consciousness for 5 months, during which I was diagnosed with major depression. For a few years, my life was significantly affected, and I would not wish that on anybody. Now that I am 30 years old, one aspect of my life has stabilized, and I am extremely grateful. I would like to take a moment to remind you to subscribe to this publication. Your subscription is greatly appreciated and helps a lot. I will now move on to our second story, which concerns my wife and the coach. My wife and I are 33 years old and have been married for approximately 11 years. We live in a formerly rural area that is rapidly becoming a suburb of a medium-sized city. The high school graduating class of 1978 had a total of 200 students. By the time of the 2020 graduation, the number of graduates had grown to nearly 500. I was born and raised on a farm. When I was 6 years old, my mother suddenly left the family home. My father, who had been a farmer, then became the primary caretaker. I began to assist with the farm work at a young age. Eventually, my father ceased farming and took a job in a factory. He reinvested the proceeds from the sale of his leased fields into purchasing additional land. During the Great Depression, he acquired numerous properties, including one that included a house. He bequeathed to me a house with the intention that I would repair it and establish a family. It is held in a trust with his other property, but we are responsible for all the associated costs. My wife was raised in a lower middle-class family with a supportive and benevolent household. They relocated to the area during our junior year of high school, and we began dating while we were still in high school. We were married once I had secured a stable employment position. Prior to that, I engaged in a range of activities to earn income, including hauling waste from a barn, painting houses, and other tasks. We have an 8-year-old son. The subject is a 40-year-old woman with one son, aged 1 year. She is a homemaker. I am currently employed as a route driver for a prominent snack food company. I have expanded my operations to encompass numerous small, independently owned businesses, including grocery stores, gas stations, and other establishments. Given the relatively sparsely populated nature of the surrounding area, I have been able to secure a sizable territory. My wife has assumed responsibility for the second truck. The construction of a supercenter grocery or merchandise store is projected to commence within the next year in my area. Should I retain ownership of the route, it will be exclusively mine. My wife and I have been married for several years, having wed shortly after graduating from high school. Our marriage has encountered some challenges, which I believe may be attributed to my tendency to work extended hours. Despite my efforts to be present and available, I acknowledge that my work commitments have occasionally taken precedence. We have had lots of fun and love our son with every fiber of our being. He is the typical boy. Currently, he is interested in sports. He played basketball in the winter and baseball this past spring and is now interested in flag football. Consequently, our relationship experienced a decline in the spring. My wife and I discussed the issue and made promises to improve. From late April through mid-June, our sex life improved significantly. We were extremely affectionate with each other. I may have been spending too much time with my son because I was exhausted, but I still completed my route. My son was playing ball and I never missed a game, although I did not attend all of his practices. In the majority of youth sports programs, fathers typically assume an active role in coaching or providing assistance. However, I was unable to make such a commitment. My wife, however, was able to assist when needed. The baseball coach, Ted, is the ex-husband of a close friend from high school, Mary. She was the most academically gifted student in our school, and she went on to attend college. They met, married, and soon had a son who was also at their marriage. Their relationship subsequently experienced a decline. Mary relocated to her parents' residence 3 years ago to have assistance with childcare. Ted relocated 2 years ago to be close to their son and, it is presumed, to rekindle their relationship. By mid to end of June, we find ourselves once again in a rut. We engage in conversation. In July, we made a commitment to recommit and took a vacation. However, the relationship remains strained. By mid-August, the bedroom situation had become tense once more. By the time September arrived, the relationship had reached a point of complete stagnation. My son began playing flag football, which he loved. I observed my wife and Ted at his practice, and it became apparent that they were running the drills. During the training sessions, a few fathers are assisting as well. I was unaware that she was helping, so I mentioned it when we returned home. My son was extremely enthusiastic and exclaimed, "She's not helping. She's a coach." It appears that when she enrolled her son in the program, she volunteered to serve as an assistant coach, which seems to require a significant time commitment. My wife is frequently sending text messages, but generally, when I am present, she is sending text messages. They go to Ted's place every day after school, and he trains his son and mine. He is teaching them how to be better, and it is evident that they are the two best players on the team. Their first game comes. I am employed in the morning and arrive at the field in time for the game. My wife and Ted are positioned side by side, providing instructions. A chair is placed next to me, and I am introduced to Mary. We observe the game until approximately the halfway point. At this juncture, Mary inquires about the well-being of my wife and me. I respond affirmatively and glance over at her. She is gazing at me intently. She stated that her son returned home after spending time at Ted's. Due to the precipitation, there was no scheduled workout. Instead, they engaged in video gaming for the remainder of the afternoon. Her son proceeded to the kitchen to retrieve additional juice and observed Ted and the wife engaged in a kiss. He promptly returned to the game and informed Mary of what he had witnessed that evening. I arose at 4. The time is midnight. On Monday morning, I arose at 3:30 a.m. to drive 45 minutes to the warehouse to retrieve my truck. After a few moments, I discerned the nature of the communication on her phone. She utilizes a multitude of devices for various purposes, and I observed numerous messages, including some containing nude images. I took screenshots of some of these messages. I typically have one day in town. On occasion, I would return home for lunch, particularly when there was a considerable amount of sexual activity. Upon returning home, I discovered that she was not there. I attempted to contact her, but she did not respond. I proceeded to drive by Ted's place, where I observed her vehicle. Upon completion of my route, she informed me that she had been at the store. She expressed regret for her absence and stated that she was aware I had been trying to surprise her. I reassured her that her absence was not a significant issue. The following week, on the same day, I once again informed her of my intention to return home for lunch. I was situated in a location proximate to Ted's. It is perplexing why she did not observe my large vehicle. She promptly exited Ted's and entered her vehicle, subsequently departing at a high rate of speed for her residence. I followed at a slow pace, and upon my arrival, I found her preparing a sandwich. We engaged in a pleasant conversation on Saturday after the game. I then took my son home, had him change, and took him to my father's house. They planned to fish in the pond, and if he desired, he could swim. However, my wife was not present, so I drove to Ted's. Her vehicle was there. I called her, and she seemed somewhat displeased. I then inquired about her whereabouts, but she did not respond. I instructed her to put on her clothes and return home. When she finally did so, I was seated at the table. She again accused me of wrongdoing, and I asked her to sit down. She refused, becoming increasingly agitated. I told her to be quiet and sit down so that I could speak, and I began to explain my perspective. I had a folder and she asked what was in it. I told her to sit down so that I could show her, and I began to present my evidence. Upon retrieving screenshots of her text messages, she became enraged, accusing me of snooping in her phone. I then presented the more incriminating messages, which she attempted to justify. However, when I produced the nude images, she ceased her protestations. I informed her that our relationship was over and that she had until the following Sunday to leave. I would be consulting with an attorney on Monday and would be taking her clothes and personal belongings. We would resolve the matter at a later date. She began to weep. She expressed remorse. I inquired as to her expectations regarding my discovery of her infidelity. I have been residing with my father since the weekend, when I returned my son to his residence to facilitate his transportation to school on Monday. I had previously informed my father that my spouse and I would no longer be cohabiting, but that my son would continue to reside in the family home. Upon my return this evening, I discovered that my spouse had removed all of her belongings. Her belongings have been removed from the premises. We had previously agreed that she would collect our son from school. She could remain in the house until I returned, or I would collect him from her parents. It is not my intention to sever all contact with her. We have a young son together, and we have filed for divorce. She will be served with the divorce papers next week. I do not intend to take any action that might embarrass her, such as serving her with the papers at a sporting event. I informed her that the divorce papers were forthcoming. She requested certain items from the house, and my attorney he stated that she could petition the court. I believe that is what he said when she appeared before the court to answer for certain items. I am not concerned about most of the items she requested, as they were not personal items, such as clothes and makeup. Many have inquired about her current situation. She remains at her parents' residence. My son visits there frequently, often until I arrive home from work. I have been attempting to conclude my tasks by 5 o'clock. The time is 12 a.m. On the majority of days, I am not engaged in remunerative activities. My legal counsel is collaborating with another attorney to ensure that my business interests are excluded from the proceedings. My father has proposed purchasing my residence and hiring me as an employee, should that be necessary. I would be required to provide financial support to the other party. We will share custody of our son, but I am currently addressing these issues. I have a couple of projects that require my attention. I have received offers of assistance from numerous individuals, including babysitting and meal preparation. During the game last Saturday, the majority of parents gathered around me with their chairs, rather than spreading out along the sidelines. I was deeply touched by this gesture. The current basketball season will conclude with this week's game and the playoffs. Thereafter, the focus will shift to the next season. Based on my discussions with numerous parents, there is a strong likelihood that their children will not be coached by Mary. Many have inquired about her, and many have also inquired about me. Some have expressed interest in learning more about Mary and our long-standing friendship. Additionally, many have inquired about the emotional challenges associated with separation. It is distressing to contemplate a future in which I am confined to adjusting to my new circumstances and providing for my son. I previously observed that Mary was the most intelligent student in our school. She is now beyond my intellectual capabilities. I would only be able to assist her in a limited capacity. We are both experiencing a similar level of distress. It is her former partner who has relocated with the intention of reconciling.